Hey, what's up, everybody? Imagine you're 21 years old, crammed into a tiny glass bubble at the very back of a massive British bomber, flying through the pitch-black night over Nazi Germany in 1944. Anti-aircraft shells are bursting all around you like deadly fireworks from hell, and enemy fighters are hunting your plane. Suddenly, everything goes wrong. Flames everywhere, the aircraft spiraling out of control. And your only way out is to step into empty air from 3.5 miles up with absolutely nothing to slow you down. No parachute, no second chance. Burn alive inside the inferno, or jump and make it quick. That's exactly the nightmare 21-year-old Nicholas Alkemade faced. And somehow, against every law of physics and common sense, he survived. This is the jaw-dropping true story of the man who fell from the sky with no parachute and lived to tell about it. Stick with me, because this tale has more layers of crazy than a Florida sinkhole swallowing a whole neighborhood, and the details will keep you glued to the screen. Let's paint the full picture so you feel like you're right there in that freezing cockpit with him. It's March 24th, 1944. World War II is at its brutal peak. The Allies are pounding Berlin hard with one of the largest bombing raids of the entire war. Hundreds of heavy bombers droning through the darkness. Nicholas Stephen Alkemade, a young flight sergeant from Norfolk, England, is serving as the tail gunner on an Avro Lancaster bomber, serial number DS-6764, nicknamed Werewolf. The plane belongs to 115 Squadron, based at RAF Wychford in Cambridgeshire. Nick's position is the most exposed and dangerous on the whole aircraft. A cramped rear turret with 4 machine guns, basically a glass bubble sticking out the back. There's no room to wear his parachute pack while he's sitting in there, so it's stored up front in the fuselage. The 7-man crew has already flown 14 missions together. They're tight-knit, like brothers bonded by shared terror and adrenaline. Pilot Jack Newman is at the controls. There's flight engineer Edgar Warren, bomb aimer Charles Hilder, navigator, wireless operator, mid-upper gunner John McDonough, and Nick in the tail. They've survived so far, but tonight, luck runs out. They're on the way back from dropping their bombs over Berlin when a German night fighter sneaks up behind them. The fighter pilot, Oberleutnant Heinz Rücker, opens fire. Bullets rip through the Lancaster's fuselage like hot knives. Fuel lines burst. The big 4-engine bomber starts shuddering violently, engines screaming in agony as flames erupt inside. The plane begins to spiral downward, completely out of control. Panic hits the crew. The other guys are shouting, scrambling for their parachutes, and bailing out one by one. You can almost hear their chutes snapping open in the dark like ghostly white flowers against the black sky. But Nick is trapped. Flames are licking into his turret now, scorching his flying boots and starting to burn his clothes. Thick, choking smoke fills the tiny space. He fights his way out of the turret, desperately crawling and clawing forward through the burning wreckage toward where his parachute pack is stored. His heart is pounding. Time is running out, but when he reaches it, horror. The pack is already on fire. The silk canopy and straps melt and burn right in front of his eyes, turning into useless smoking goo. No escape that way. Picture the split-second decision that hits him like a freight train. Nick later recounted it in his own calm, matter-of-fact words. "I had no doubts at all that this was the end of the line. The question was whether to stay in the plane and fry or jump to my death. I decided to jump and make a quick, clean end of things." A quick, clean end from 18,000 feet? That's over 3 miles of nothing but freezing air. Rushing past at terminal velocity, around 120 miles per hour once you hit full speed. Most people would black out long before impact, but Nick makes his choice. He rotates the damaged turret, elbows open the hatch, takes one last breath of smoke-filled air, and just falls backward into the void. No harness, no silk, nothing but the roaring wind. As he tumbles away, the Lancaster explodes somewhere above him in a massive fireball that lights up the entire night sky like a second deadly sun. The blast wave probably helped push him farther out. The rest of the crew, not all made it. Pilot Jack Newman and 3 others rode the burning plane down and died in the crash, near Oberkirchen in the Sauerland region. They were later buried together in Hanover War Cemetery. 2 others who bailed successfully became prisoners of war. But Nick? He's already plummeting through the darkness, alone with the stars and the ground rushing up to meet him. Here's where your brain starts to short circuit. Falling at that speed and height should turn a human body into nothing but red mist on impact. Scientists have studied cases like this for decades. Terminal velocity for a spread eagle human is about 120 many-quarsecs, and hitting the ground at that speed is like being slammed into concrete. From a car crash at highway speeds, except multiplied many times over. The fall itself would have taken roughly a minute and a half of pure freefall before he blacked out or hit. Nick later said he remembered this strange, eerie calm washing over him as he fell, like he was suspended in total silence despite the wind screaming past. Then, blackness. He estimated he was unconscious for around 3 hours. When he came to, he wasn't dead. His body had smashed through the thick, springy branches of a tall fir tree in a dense pine forest. The limbs and needles whipped and bent around him like a natural braking system, slowing his deadly momentum step by step without snapping his bones. Then he plunged deep into a soft, fresh snowbank, 18 full inches of powder that cushioned the final impact, like the world's most forgiving natural airbag. He tumbled to a stop under those pines, blinked up at the same stars he'd just fallen through, and realized he could still move his arms and legs. A sprained knee, painful burns from the plane fire on his face and hands, bruises that would make a pro wrestler wince, but no broken bones, no shattered spine, no internal bleeding that killed him on the spot. He was alive, standing, well, limping in the middle of enemy territory deep in Nazi Germany. The real nightmare was only beginning. Shivering in the freezing cold, Nick pulls out a small distress whistle from his pocket and starts blowing it desperately, hoping someone, anyone, will find him before hypothermia finishes the job gravity couldn't. Local German civilians hear the whistle and discover the injured British airman. They carefully carry him to a hospital in the nearby town of Meschede. Doctors treat his burns and sprain as best they can in wartime conditions. But then the Gestapo arrives. The Nazi secret police, cold-eyed and ruthless interrogators. Nick's story sounds like pure fantasy to them. You fell 18,000 feet without any parachute? Lies. You must have hidden it somewhere. You're a spy or saboteur. They grill him for hours in intense sessions, trying every trick to break him. But Nick stays steady, repeating the exact same details without changing a word. The Germans, still highly suspicious, send a team out to the wreckage site to investigate. And what do they discover? The burned-out remains of his parachute pack, exactly where he said it had caught fire inside the fuselage. The plane's serial number DS6664 matches. No harness had been used. The evidence is undeniable. In one of those bizarre twists only war produces, the Nazis issue an official certificate, signed, stamped, and everything, testifying that Flight Sergeant Nicholas Alkemade had indeed fallen from 18,000 feet without a parachute, and survived. They even treat him with a strange kind of professional respect after that. He becomes a minor celebrity among the Germans who hear the tale. Some Luftwaffe officers actually wanted to meet the man who beat the sky. They ship him off to Stalag Luft III, the notorious prisoner of war camp in Poland made famous years later by the movie The Great Escape. There, among thousands of Allied airmen, Nick's story spreads like wildfire. He becomes a living legend in the camp, guys swapping cigarettes and stories, barely believing he's real. Life in Stalag Luft III wasn't easy. Cramped barracks, terrible food, constant boredom mixed with the threat of guards. Nick kept a diary, noting the humdrum days broken up by theater shows, sports, reading, and occasional work details to pass the time. He even survived the brutal winter death march when the camp was evacuated as the Russians advanced, hundreds of miles on foot through blizzards and sub-zero temperatures. Yet his luck held again. He made it through and was finally repatriated back to England in May 1945. After the war, Nick didn't chase fame or fortune. He married, started a family, and took a quiet job in the chemical industry back home in the UK. He carried a slight limp from that sprained knee as his only permanent souvenir. Decades later, in the 1980s, he appeared on British television, shows like I've Got a Secret on the BBC in 1984, where the panel had to guess his incredible feat. With the clue, a happening with no strings attached. He also popped up on Just Amazing, calmly recounting the night he chose the long drop over the flames, even cracking a few dry jokes about his no-strings-attached landing. He lived a normal, unassuming life until he passed away in June 1987 at age 64 in Liskeard, Cornwall. In 2020, 115 Squadron even renamed a building in his honor, all the at RAF Wittering, the Alkemade building. Think about the physics for a moment and it still blows the mind. Experts have run the numbers. The trees acting like giant springs with their flexible branches absorbing energy, the deep snow decelerating him over a longer distance. One scientific paper even modeled it, and concluded that with just the right conditions, survival wasn't impossible. But it was razor thin. One wrong branch angle, 6 inches less snow, or hitting at a slightly different speed, and he'd have been gone. The German pilot who shot them down, Heinz Rucker, survived the war too. Years later, there was even a quiet meeting at the old crash site between survivors. A strange kind of closure across old battle lines. In a world packed with wild survival tales, gators crashing backyard pools, lightning striking the same person multiple times, this one still feels like the universe bending the rules just for one ordinary young man. Nicholas Alkemade didn't set out to be a hero or a record holder. He was just a tail gunner doing his job who faced an impossible choice and got the luckiest break in history. If this one had you leaning forward the whole time, smash that like button. Subscribe for more deep dive, bizarre, morbid, and mind-blowing tales with that signature Florida weird energy. And tell me in the comments, what's the wildest real survival story you've ever heard? Does anything top Nick's freefall miracle? Drop it below. I read everyone. Until next time, stay weird, stay curious, and remember, sometimes when you step into the void, the world steps up to catch you. See you in the next one.